What's the most embarrassingly awkward situation you ever encountered while staying at a friend's house as a kid? Walked into the toilet in the middle of the night to find his mum shaving herself with an electric razor. Let me try and paint a picture. She was standing by the toilet with one foot up on the edge of the sink, holding the buzzing instrument which was making laps of her ring piece. I stood for what felt like an eternity, but it couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 seconds simply staring at this, trying to comprehend what was happening. Her blue eyes and brown eye locked with my eyes, and we both held our breath, the hum of the razor chewing her ass hairs the only sound bouncing off the bathroom walls. A sickening concert heralding the onset of potential repressed memories. She said my name really quietly, half a gasp. She flicked the switch off, yet held her flamingo stance. I said, and ran back to my sleeping bag, pulled it over my head, and tried to go to sleep. In the morning, she never left her room, said she was ill. Never was allowed to stay at his place again. Story 2. My friend's mom, Mrs. Was an amazing woman. When I was around 7, I was attending a sleepover at my friend's house. We were getting ready for bed, a few of us were waiting in the hall, and one of the other girls was taking forever in the bathroom. I had to go really bad. Mrs. A was standing in the hallway near me when it happened. I lost control and peed my pants right there. Luckily, none of the others noticed it except Mrs. A. You know what that wonderful woman did? She suddenly shrieks something about a spider and, accidentally, throws the glass of juice she happened to be holding all over me. She made a big enough fuss to draw all attention away from me, grabbed a towel and wrapped me up while apologizing profusely about how she's terrified of spiders and lost control. She gave me spare pajamas to wear while she washed my clothes, and had me take a shower so I wouldn't attract ants. None of the other girls had any idea what really happened and thought Mrs. A was nuts. She's my hero. Story 3. I was at my best friend of 10 years' house, and in the middle of dinner with his family, his parents decided to announce to their children and me that they would be getting a divorce and splitting up the family. My friend didn't talk much that night, and the worst part was that I couldn't leave because my parents were out of town and I was staying with them. Story 4. Kid's dad brings us dinner at the table. He gets a sippy cup. His dad asks me if I need one or if I can be trusted not to spill on the table. I say I don't need one. I immediately knock my drink all over the table. We were at least 10 years old. I knock drinks over regularly now. Story 5. I was staying over at a friend's house with a couple other neighborhood kids. My friend's parents essentially locked my friends and I in the basement for the night so we could have our sleepover down there. And once the door was shut, my friend's parents get into a huge fight over some inane crap. It was horrible. It sounded like they were screaming at the absolute top of their lungs, throwing plates around, flipping furniture, and at one point I think I heard one of them threaten to get a gun and start shooting. But the worst part was the 2 hours of angry makeup sex in their creaky bed that followed their tirade. Story 6. I was about 14, 15 years old. I've had to wear diapers for a lot of my life. I pretty much own it now. But then, it was pretty embarrassing, obviously. Was staying at a good friend's house for a week or so. He knew I had to wear them, but his other friend who was there with us hanging out for the first night of the week did not. Long story short, I'm getting set to changing on the floor in the bathroom when unknowing friend walks in on me, pajama pants off, laying on the floor in a wet diaper. He laughs at me while I sit there not having any idea what to do in shock. And then he takes my bag of supplies, powder, extra diapers, and throws them outside into the pool. So now I'm stuck in the bathroom with nothing to change into. Long story short, his mom had to go down to Walgreens and buy me a new pack while I waited crying in their bathroom in a wet diaper at 14 years old. And I had to watch his dad retrieve my spares from the pool. And I was there for a week, so we're talking maybe 25 plus diapers, half of which were for nighttime and thus more absorbent, all expanding to full capacity. That's maybe 75 pounds of wet trash that had to be pulled from the pool. It took a long time, and he wouldn't let me help. Not that I really wanted to sit there crying and doing that anyway. Story ends nicely, though, because the other friend was banned from the house. He managed to duck up one of the pool filters pretty badly after a diaper floated in there and burst. His parents had to pay to fix it. And my friend didn't really like him anymore after that, and the whole family was really nice to me about it, and the rest of the week wasn't even embarrassing. And the pool was fixed within 2 days, so that was fun, but that whole night was just the worst. Story 7. I went to spend the night with a girl from class for the first time. I was excited too. She was one of those girls everyone was afraid of, and I was really timid and shy. Within an hour of getting there, her mom and sister got into a huge, screaming argument. The mom boated herself in the leg with a knife. As a result of the fight, I'm not sure why. Her dad loaded up the mom, sister, my friend, and me into their tiny car to take the mom to the hospital. The mom was stating the whole time she wouldn't go in. We all sat in the parking lot as they argued for about an hour. We drove back to her house without going into the air. A mom, sister, and dad began fighting again. This was around midnight. I called my mom to check in and tell her goodnight, and gave her the secret phrase to come home. I forgot to bring my toothbrush. We feigned a family emergency, and she came to get me. Never did get an offer to sleep over again. Commentaire? I should have had a secret phrase. One time, I was at a friend's sleepover in 5th grade, and one of the other boys was being incredibly rude to me. I decided I'd call my mom and have her pick me up at 4 in the morning, but everyone was already asleep, so I turned my friend's phone on and called my mom and asked her to pick me up. After I hung up, my friends woke up and were like, "Why do you want to leave?" It was really awkward and embarrassing. Story 8. I was at a group sleepover for a neighbor's birthday party. At night, when I wanted to sleep, the girls were being way too loud, so I went to go sleep in her brother's room. He was out at his own sleepover. I opened the door and saw that their aunt was in the bed. No big deal, except she shouted, "Close the door or I'll beat you to crap." I was 9. Story 9. How about while a friend was staying at my house? Friend was supposed to spend the night, but her mom didn't come to pick her up in the morning, or the morning after that. I don't remember how long she stayed, but after 4 days, my mom eventually drove my friend to my friend's grandmother's house. Commenter, I had something similar happen. My parents agreed to have my friend stay the night, and at dinner asked her when she'd be picked up in the morning. I can remember the feeling of dread I had in my stomach when she said, "Oh, I'll just take my bus home from school Monday." My friend never mentioned she'd be staying the whole weekend with me. Her parents were out of town, so I didn't tell my parents. Luckily, they were calm about it, but they were pretty pissed. The best part of this story? My friend didn't even make it through the night. A thunderstorm came through. She freaked out, and my mom had to take her across town to her grandparents' house at 3 a.m. We were 12, and from what I later learned from our other friends, it wasn't the first time she had pulled that stunt. Story 10. When I was in the 4th grade, I had a friend who I spent every weekend with. We stayed at his house and watched movies or played games. This particular day, we were about 5 hours into a Grand Theft Auto playthrough. We ran out of things to talk about, so we had been pretty quiet for a while. He turned to me with the biggest smile on his face and let out one of the biggest farts I've ever heard. I knew that I had to try to beat his fart, so I let one out. It wasn't as loud, but it was much longer. We both sat there for a bit laughing when he lets another one rip. It was even louder and longer than both of our other farts combined. "Try and beat that one," he said. I prepped myself, getting ready for the fart of my life. I looked him in the eyes and let that fart fly. Only, there was no fart, but there was a filling feeling in my pants. "Are you going to do it?" He hadn't caught on that I just filled my pants with crap right in his room. I told him that he beat me, and I excused myself to the bathroom. I sat there for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to do. I finally made my decision. I emptied his bathroom garbage, took the bag, and stuck my poopy underwear in it. I stuck the bag in my pocket and left the bathroom. "Hey man, what took so long? I'm leaving." "Why?" "Shut up." I ran towards the door, jumped on my crafty BMX bike, and pedaled as fast as I could back to my house. Story 11. He had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and ended up plugging the toilet. I figured if I keep flushing, it'll go down. Nope, flooded the bathroom with poop water. Another time, same friend, same toilet, also in the middle of the night. The water pipe was frozen, but I really had to go. So I ended up leaving a big rank pile of liquidly crap in the dry bowl. In the morning, the whole downstairs smelled awful, and his parents wouldn't make eye contact. Story 12. I was supposed to meet my friend at his house at around 5 because he had some appointment with his mom. I get there at probably 4:45 and head up to their back deck. My house was a couple blocks behind his, so I always came this way. So I go up to their big glass doors and I see his dad getting railed by the next door neighbor. I've never told him this, but I can never be in a room alone with his dad again. Story 13. Back when I was in middle school, my friends and I used to play airsoft and we took it seriously. We had expensive guns, armor, the whole nine. Anyway, we used to play back in the woods behind our neighborhood, in the middle of which there was a field. So, we're playing and I'm on the edge of the field. Along the edge of said field, there are piles of mulch that had to be at least 9 feet high. We used them for cover. Well, I saw my friends on the opposing team approaching, so I ran as fast as I could and jumped next to one of the mulch piles. Except I fell in. As I roll back out, I can feel the barrage of airsoft bullets hitting me. I'm out, stop shooting, I begged. "We never started," they replied. This is when I look down to see that I am covered in fire ants. I couldn't even see the color of my shirt. Panicking, I start trying to rip off my clothes, but I remember that I'm wearing armor, which someone else has to help me remove. So I endure the pain as my friends run across the field to me and eventually remove the armor. As soon as they do, I strip naked as I begin running back through the woods and onto the main street of my neighborhood, down a few blocks, and straight into the living room of the friend whose house I was at, which is when I made deer-in-the-headlights eye contact with his two parents who are on the couch. Pausing only for a moment, I run out their back door and jump into the pool. Ah, relief. Story 14. A friend of mine always bragged about the size of his little friend, said that it ran in his family. Anyway, he invites me and a few other friends over to watch movies and spend the night. In the middle of the night, his dad gets up to pee with no clothes on. His little banana was swinging between his legs at least 10, 12 inches. He had to step over us to get through. We all tried to pretend to sleep, but started giggling and laughing. Never doubted my buddy again. Story 15. Oh boy. I was maybe 10 and staying over at a friend who had moved across town's house. Somewhere in the middle of the night, he and his brother decided to strip completely naked and shake their junks around wildly. I was confused, of course, and then they tried to get me to join. When I told them I wasn't having any of that, they tried to wrestle my clothes off of me. I broke free, called my mom on the home phone. It was like 2:30 a.m. and waited out front for her to pick me up. Never talked to Tyler again. Story 16. I stayed at a mate's house once when I was around 9 in the morning as I was eating breakfast. His dad just decides to sit beside me and pull a bong at 8 a.m. Story 17. At a buddy's house in like 4th grade. Him and his little brother were arguing about whose turn it was to do the dishes. The dad got pissed, grabbed them both by the head, and slammed them together. It made that lovely thwack sound. They both started crying, and the dad turns and says to me, "You think they'll do the dishes now?" I was quite scared and left ASAP. Story 18. 5th grade. Started hanging out with a kid I never really did before, and he had a sleepover with our mutual friends for his birthday. Everything was great, played in 64 all night in his basement, and his mom was cooking all sorts of food and being generally awesome. Gets late, we all start falling asleep in the basement. Then Dad gets home drunk as all hell. His parents proceeded to scream and beat the crap out of each other, all while we were in the basement witnessing the entire ordeal upstairs. After about 10 minutes, we hear his older sister enter the scuffle, trying to stop it and get them to calm down and stop. Dad hits the sister. Mom pulls a knife out and starts threatening Dad. Sister runs away. Dad throws a lamp and promptly exits the house with various name-calling and swearing. All quiet upstairs except for his mom crying. We hear her on the phone, and shortly after a cop shows up to file a report, I assume, and an aunt shows up to console Mom. We all kind of fall asleep wondering what the damn happened. Next morning, we go upstairs and see some damage, but the mess is cleaned up. We try engaging with his mom, and she seems okay, just worn down. We offer to take some trash bags outside for her and see some ripped up presents in the garbage can outside. That night, his dad took off and filed for divorce not long after, and his sister didn't come home for a few days, until they were pretty positive he wouldn't be back. Story 19. Went upstairs at a friend's house so she could ask her mother permission to walk downtown. Mother and boyfriend are nude, clearly have just finished having some dirty things and make no move to cover themselves from other people's old eyes. Maybe adult nudity shouldn't be a big deal, but my friend was clearly embarrassed. Her mother had also been separated from her father for less than a year at the time. Her older sister came into the room as we were leaving to ask them how the damn they thought having sex with the door open was appropriate in the middle of the afternoon in a house full of neighboring children. Story 20. The time when, at age 9, I marched up to my best friend Becky's mom and said, "Becky isn't adopted." Joe just said that she was adopted. Joe was her older brother. Becky's mom just stood there awkwardly, then said it was time for me to go home. Turns out Becky was adopted. Her parents hadn't told her yet. I have no idea why her brother felt the need to tell me and not his sister. Story 21. This is something I've never really told anyone, but here goes. I had a friend, I guess, when I was around 10. Let's call him Jack. He invited me over to a sleepover at his house. We were going to watch Ghostbusters 2, which had just come out on VS at Blockbuster. Anyways, I get there, and I am surprised to see this other kid from my school there. He was about our age. Let's call him Jim. I remember going downstairs sometime after the movie started to get something to drink. When I came back upstairs and opened the door, I was shocked. Jack and Jim were on the bed. Jack was on his back, and Jim was on top of him. My 10-year-old brain couldn't comprehend what was going on. Jack acted like it was no big deal and called it sword fighting, and wanted to know if I wanted to join in. I just said nothing, and proceeded to rewatch the movie. I never really talked to Jack again. Story 22. Was staying at friend's house in the country for the weekend in 5th grade. They had a lot of animals, including 2 adorable lab puppies. Unfortunately, none of their animals were treated, and one of the puppies got distemper and died. I guess it happened quite quickly, I don't know. We were outside, and my friend's dad and brother were looking at the other puppy, which was being extremely playful. They said it was a sign of distemper, then puppy died. No one was happy about this, nor did anyone seem to mind that they were surrounded by kids. I don't know anything about distemper. This is the first time I've thought about it in over a decade for sure. So I can't really remember how my 11-year-old brain processed that. I remember my friend, a girl, was crying, but I wasn't. I was comforting her for some reason, saying, "Don't worry, it'll be okay." Weird. Well, glad I got that off my chest. Story 23. Well, this wasn't embarrassing on their part. I was staying over my friend's house as her grandmother had just passed away suddenly. This was when I was 14, so our standard response at the time was, "Your mum." It was the ultimate answer for any question, so it became a kind of reflex. By now, I'm sure you know where this is going. Yep. My friend's mum comes in the room, eyes red from crying, and asks, "What are you girls doing?" with a smile on her face. Without missing a beat, I respond with, "We're doing your mum," and just trailed off. I looked at the shocked and horrified expression on my friend's face and knew there was no recovery to be made and simply said, "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Surname." That was really rude and insensitive, but it was too late. She burst into tears, insisted that it was fine, and then left the room. I still feel really awful. Seriously, she had passed away that morning. And that, kids, is why we communicate with people properly. Story 24. I was at a friend's house when we were both 12 years old. I had the bright idea of biking down to the nearest grocery store to get snacks, so he asked his dad for permission. His dad said no, so my friend started arguing, then crying, then throwing an all-out temper tantrum. He ended up getting spanked and sent to his room while I got a ride back home. I just sat and stared at the wall the whole time it was going down and felt like it was my fault because I suggested it. Story 25. I was at my friend's house and his parents told him that after I left, he had to take a bath. He started throwing a fit, crying and screaming, "I refuse! I refuse!" And I just stood there on the steps, not knowing what to do. His parents remained calm through the fit, but I couldn't take it anymore and kind of slinked out the back door. He was an interesting kid. Commenter. Kind of a similar story. My ex's sister, when she was around 13 or 14, absolutely refused to take a shower. Me and the ex-in would be downstairs and the parents and her sister would be screaming at each other. The sister's only reasoning was that she couldn't get her hair to look right after a shower. After one night of a particularly loud screaming match, her dad gets off of work and is clearly not putting up with it. He looked at her dead in the eyes and said, "You smell like crap. This is why people avoid you." She stormed off into her room. He eventually apologized and she took a shower later that night. That family was weird. Glad I got out of that. Story 26. Well, this one time I was at buddy number 1A's house with buddy number 2. We were all probably around 12, 13 years old. Anyways, buddy number 2 has to go to the bathroom. A little while later, I feel a massive dump coming on. I rushed to the bathroom to avoid unloading in my pants. Immediately, I saw a toilet bowl jam packed with dew, but takeoff was imminent. I didn't have time to plunge it, and it was the only toilet. I don't want to get too graphics here, so I'll just say that after I did my business, there was no hope for this toilet. We all played baseball together and would stop at the nearest fast food restaurant after every game. I imagine we had Taco Bell or KFC, something along those lines. So I tried with every bit of determination in my body to fix this disaster, but it wasn't happening. This toilet was ducked, and it was as if it were just choked to death. So I went with the only remaining option. Do what buddy number 2 did. Just act like it never happened, and no one will find out until you're gone. Well, go figure buddy number 1 had to go to the bathroom. After he left, I turned to buddy number 2 and told him we have a situation. He tried to act like nothing happened, but I explained to him how the situation had taken an extreme turn for the worst. We just started geeking our asses off until, inevitably, buddy number 1 let out a huge "what the heck." We didn't know what to say, but we kept laughing our asses off until buddy number 1 joined in. So his sister comes out to find out what is so funny, and we just tell her to go to the bathroom. Crap, was it priceless. She starts freaking out because apparently their parents were getting off of work around that time and they were going to be pissed. The plunger was obviously a no-go. What she did next will forever be ingrained into my memory. Something so horrific that I gag whenever I think about it. She put her arm into a plastic bag and tried to scoop the crap out of the drain. It was the funniest and most disgusting thing we had ever seen. The bag slipped off and left her arm just chilling in a bowl of crap water. Buddy number 2 gets out of there and never comes back. He lived across the street. I, on the other hand, was sleeping over and had to witness the parents' rage. Funnily enough, my buddy's sister got most of the flack for what she did. We never ever let her live that crap down. Story 27. When he pulled out a machete from under the bed at 3 a.m. and said he used it to cut lizards' heads off. In the morning, I walked in on his little brother, not pleasure himself, but just playing with his little friend in the middle of the living room. I noped out and never went back. Story 28. I went to a friend's house for a sleepover. My first. When I was about 10. Mind you, this was in the early 60s, so no video games and only B&W TV. To further clarify this picture, I grew up in Texas, and my whole family went to the Church of Christ every Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and every Wednesday evening. And my family was way into ignorance is bliss. No information on sex, love, rock and roll, music, or anything that I or my siblings might find the least bit interesting. If I had ever walked into the bathroom and found my dad shaving wearing only his pajamas, we would both be extremely embarrassed and uncomfortable. This was normal, as far as I knew. So my friend and I and his parents are sitting in the living room watching the Beverly Hillbillies or Bonanza or something, and his 2 sisters walk into the room and lie down on the floor in front of us to watch the show. I had so many strange, powerful new feels hit me so fast and hard that I kind of stopped breathing for a moment. I just froze on the sofa and tried to stop staring at the 2 of them lying on the floor. And the next thing I noticed was that I was the only one who noticed anything out of the ordinary. I remember desperately trying to concentrate on the TV show, but it was hopeless. I don't remember my friend even noticing my state of embarrassment, or his parents either. As soon as the TV show ended, the 2 girls got up, kissed their parents goodnight, and went to bed. I never said anything to any of them, and as far as I know, they never knew how freaked out I was. The next day, after my parents had picked me up, they asked me how the sleepover went, and I said, okay. I had no idea what to say or how to tell them what had happened or even what had happened. And I remember my mother saying something like, well, we were a little concerned, seeing as how they're Catholics and all. So I grew up, for a while, thinking that Catholics were having all the fun in the world, sinning all over the place. Story 29. My friend getting beat with a metal spatula by her mother because she didn't change out of her school clothes as soon as she got home. I was sitting downstairs the whole time. Story 30. When I was in grade school, I had a friend I used to play with that lived around the corner from my house. He had a treehouse and a Sega Genesis and a Game Boy Color and a Super Nintendo, a bazillion games and movies. I had none of those things, so I hung out with him a lot. A few months after we started hanging out, I had a sleepover with him. He went to the bathroom, and a few minutes later, I heard him shout, "Mom, I'm ready!" His mom yelled to his dad, "Bob," or whatever his name was, "it's your turn." Turns out his parents wiped his ass for him, literally. We were probably 8 or 9. He had no physical or cognitive handicaps. Story 31. At 3 a.m., my friend and I stopped playing Halo for a bit and go to get some water because we were thirsty. Walk into the kitchen to see his dad's girlfriend giving his dad BJ in the middle of the room. We stayed thirsty all night. Story 32. Okay, here we go. I was about 12 and sleeping over at a friend's house. There was an argument between him and his brother, and they started fighting. Now, I'm lying on the bottom bunk pretending to be asleep when their mother storms in and heads straight to the top bunk, where the fight is happening. At this point, I open my eyes to realize that the mother is wearing nothing but a very large t-shirt that goes down to just below the hip. The mother reaches the bunk beds and proceeds to reach out to restrain the brothers. In doing so, the large t-shirt comes up to reveal what can only be described as a hairy beast. She had no underwear on whatsoever. I look at it for about 8 seconds before the t-shirt covers it again after she's done telling off the brothers. I lie there in shock before exclaiming to my friend, "I've just seen your mom's beast!" He laughed his head off. Story 33. My friend's sister had a birthday party and I was invited. We were 16. We got really drunk. My friend, for the first time where I live, it is legal to get drunk at 16. And when we went home, I slept in his bed. My friend's bed is really high up, like plus 2 meters, and I puked in the middle of the night on him. He slept on the floor, resulting in splashing all over his room. I spent the rest of the night cleaning his room. The next day, I got invited for lunch and they made special food for his sister's birthday, and I could not make eye contact with anyone. So embarrassing. He's still one of my best friends, and his room smelled for another 6 months because of my vomiting. Always have a good laugh when we think about this story. Story 34. I had a sleepover at my house with this one girl. I was 10, she was 12. We were both big fans of Harry Potter, and we talked about it before going to bed. She kept going on about how sexy she found Harry, which I thought was weird since I wasn't yet at the age where I thought about these things. Anyway, we went to bed. I was always pretty flighty. It took me a good hour to make myself fall asleep, but the other girl fell asleep quickly. Then she started talking in her sleep. I had never known anyone who talked in their sleep before. It took me years to find out I did it, so I thought this was some sort of game. I recall she was saying something about loving Harry, so I started talking back to her, whispering in her ear that I was Harry while giggling. She damn launches at me, supposedly in her sleep, and starts touching me in awkward places while muttering how much she loves Harry. I shoved her off. No easy task. She was rather large and I was a skinny goblin of a kid. And jumped up from the floor we were sleeping onto my bed, curled up by the wall and freaked out. She started crying and begging Harry to come back. I just sat there and stared out the window, trying to ignore it until I fell asleep on my bed. The next morning, she seemed perfectly cheerful and normal. I chose not to bring it up ever at all. I still don't know if she was actually asleep. It just took a joke too far, or genuinely was trying to get me. Story 35. This wasn't when I was staying at their house, but afterwards I could never stay there again. I was 18 and had been best friends with the girl that lived across the street from me. Let's call her Sue, since I was 3. I had recently been hired at an adult store and was still nervous around the shelves of sex toy and pervy old man customers. My boss noticed and started chastising me, telling me that I needed to appear comfortable and talk to the customers, or they wouldn't feel comfortable and I would be fired. So I decided to do just that. The next person in the door, I thought, I'll be cool and calm and talk to them about foot fetishes. The bell rang when I was in the back, stocking DVDs. By the time I came out, the guy had his back to me, looking through the sex toy wall. He already had a giant one-sex toy in his hands. So I stepped up behind him and said, "Oh, that's a great model. We sell quite a number of those, and everyone always seems very satisfied when they come back." The dude turns around and it's Sue's father, a man who watched me grow up and who made me lunches when I was 9 and put Band-Aids on my SCD knees, holding an enormous plastic toy complete with bulgy veins and all. We locked eyes, and when the realization hit, I'm sure the look on my face mirrored the mortified look on his. He put down the sex toy dong without saying a word. I did an about face and marched straight back into the back of the store. He left. We have never spoken about it, and every time I see him, I know he's remembering it too. I told my dad a few years after it happened. He burst out laughing, telling me that I had probably ruined a great night for Sue's mother. Story 36. My friend had a problem where he wet the bed. One time, a few people and I were over at his house, and his whole dad came in his room and berated him about wetting the bed. He was embarrassing him about it and even punished him. He made us all go home because of something my friend couldn't control. I guess you can say that was pretty awkward. Story 37. Was in 7th or 8th grade, can't remember. And my friend Tyler was having a birthday party sleepover, so there are probably 10 of us there playing Roller Coaster Tycoon and having a water gun fight, middle school kid crap. Well, his family has 2 computers, one in Tyler's room and one in the living room. Tyler's computer didn't have internet. Now the story is set up. So it's about 1 or 2 a.m., and everyone's in the living room, except this new guy I met and me. We were playing School Tycoon, mixing it up, I know, and we decided to look for adult film on his computer. Surely, he had found a way to download adult film on his computer. What 13-year-old boy wouldn't? We start searching through every folder and file on his computer. Eventually, we find a hidden one named Schoolwork, and sure enough, there is a video in there. We open it up and we see a homemade video of a girl doing 8J. So after 3 seconds, we close the video and are convinced that Tyler likes adult films. We do the only thing boys our age do. We go get another friend and show him. Repeat this a couple times, and now we have all 10 guys, except Tyler, in the room watching the video. That is when we realize that the TV remote on the bed, in which this one is Pleasure himself, looks like the one right next to the keyboard. Then we notice that the bed is the exact same as the one behind us. Ding, that isn't a girl Pleasure herself. That's Tyler. He had long California-style blonde hair. He had set his camera up and recorded Pleasure himself, and now everyone at the sleepover had seen it. Breakfast was awkward, especially since he knew we found his video. Story 38. Early teenager, but I was invited to a friend of a friend's house. Rich-looking place. About 15 minutes in, we go in the backyard swimming pool. I slam a beach ball right into his mom's face enough to send her head back. Later, we had dinner, and I slept over like nothing happened. Cool people. Story 39. My friend's 10th birthday. We had 6 friends over, and we stayed up watching the first South Park movie. The birthday boy, Nolan, got a motor scooter as his big present. The next morning, we woke up to small turds in obscure places on the floor, which we assumed was the fault of Nolan's dog. Nope, we would soon learn this was far worse. Fast forward, we are all taking turns on the scooter. Before it was my turn, my friend Curtis hopped on. As he pulled up and handed me the scooter, I noticed something peculiar, brown stuff on the seat. We then asked Curtis what the heck it was and immediately regretted it. Curtis crapped his pants, didn't change his clothes, rode the scooter with his crap-stained pants. I'm 20 years old, and I will never forget that story. Most awkward birthday party of my life. Story 40. When I was probably 12, I went to a friend's house for a sleepover. When we finally went to bed, she tells me that she normally can't fall asleep without Pleasure herself first. Story 41. Late to the game, but here it goes. Was spending the night at my friend's house. Being the 13-year-old girls that we were watching the movie Grease and dancing around the living room. During grease lighting, my friend's mom storms out of her room and screams at her daughter, "Why are you dancing like that? You look like a whale. You're so fat." Keep in mind my friend was 5'2" and weighed max 105 pounds. Friend storms off to her room crying. I chase after her. I try to comfort her, and when she stops crying, I tell her that I should probably go. I'm 5'3" and weighed roughly 180 pounds at the time. I was just imagining what her mom thought about my weight. Just then, her mom comes barging into her room, drags her by the arm into the bathroom, and tells her, "Look at your arms in the mirror. You see how round they are? That's because you're fat." My friend is sobbing at this point, begging her mom to stop. And then I hear her say, "How do you think Ari Bobby feels? She thinks you're calling her fat." So the mom comes to see me and tells me that I shouldn't feel bad. I'm naturally big-boned, and I could never be skinny. And even if I did get skinny, it wouldn't look good. Stood there awkwardly as she pat me on the back and walked away. Sobbed myself to sleep that night and left the next morning before she woke up. Still cringe over the awkwardness of that argument. Story 42. I was at my friend's house, age 11. Anytime I wasn't in school or at home, I was there. So his family was used to me being around. This time, a little too much. We were in the kitchen making food when his dad strolls in after a shower, expecting only his son to be there, and flashes him while letting rip. I'll never forget it, the horror. Story 43. Mine was at a sleepover when I was about 8. I was dreaming about how badly I had to pee. In my dream, I sat on the toilet and with a sigh of relief, peed. I woke up from the dream in the middle of peeing myself. I was sleeping on the floor in a now sopping wet comforter. Story 44. I was a sophomore in high school and was spending the night at my friend's mom's house. First time I had been there ever, let alone spend the night. His mom is super nice, made us dinner, cookies, let us play Halo on the big screen, full volume, etc. So we finally went to sleep at around 3 a.m. in the living room, which has this kind of open bar area that is shared with the kitchen. And right under the bar in the living room is the couch I'm sleeping on. At around 7 a.m., I am woken up by some noise coming from the kitchen. Nothing thinking much of it. I go back to sleep. 7:30 a.m. There is still noise coming from the kitchen, and it sounds like the fridge's ice machine is broken or something, so I get up to see if the door is open or whatever. Only to be greeted by my friend's mom, bent over the kitchen table, having sex senseless by her boyfriend. I honestly didn't know what to do when she saw me, so I just kind of stood there and meekly smiled. She smiled back, got up, pulled him out, and walked her boy toy upstairs to her room. My friend doesn't know and will never find out. Story 45. My best friend's mom was an alcoholic and his dad was a pilot, so he WS frequently gone. His mother was beautiful, but when she drank, she was a horrible person. One night when we were about 12, we were sitting on the floor playing a board game, and his mother came in the room, drunk and naked. I felt bad for my friend. We just kept our eyes glued to the game, not daring to look up. She was yelling about him for something, but he just answered her without looking at her. Then she went and sat in a chair next to us and fell asleep. Then I said something like, "I have some new baseball cards. Do you want to go see them?" So we ran over to my house and I whispered to my mother, "Mrs. Jones is drunk. Can Bobby sleep here?" We had 6 kids in a small house, but my mother made room for us to sleep in the den. The sad thing is they moved, but I caught up with him years later and invited him to my wedding. He came and got drunk. Story 46. I'm late, but it's kind of a two-parter. I used to get up really early as a kid, and I spent the night at a friend's house where everyone slept in. I was in 3rd grade, I think, and my friend and me would sleep in the guest room together, across from her room. Since I woke up early, I would go quietly play in her room. After a while, I'd start trying to dress up weird to wake her. As I was walking across the hall back to her room, I looked down the hall and her dad was standing at the end without any clothes. I think he said, "Oops," and I dove back into the room and didn't leave it until my friend came for me. The second weird thing was when I woke up another time and she wasn't in bed. I was amazed she woke up before me. I ran downstairs and her mom was in the kitchen and said she had slept with them and I could go wake her. So I go into their room and she's curled up alone under the covers. To try and wake her, I lifted the cover and she was without any clothes. I freaked out, covered her, and went back downstairs. I just told her mom she wouldn't wake up and ate my Cheerios. Story 47. Early high school. A group of us were staying over at a friend's, playing D&D. We played well into the night, and for whatever reason, I fell asleep sitting at the dining room table. Now keep in mind, his mom was a pastor. So there I am, asleep in a dining room chair. My leg falls asleep. I mean really badly. I wake up at 3. 4 in the morning, my leg completely numb. I try to stand up and immediately fall over with a crash. So there I am on the floor with my leg almost paralyzed, but the blood returning. The pins and needles were showing up. It was very, very painful. Still mostly asleep, I start punching my leg, no idea why, and swearing like a sailor. I mean, I was almost poetic in my profanity. I don't know how long I was doing this, but suddenly there's my friend's mom and sister at the bottom of the stairs staring at me like she had just caught me murdering her son. I don't think she liked me very much after that. Story 48. About 6 years old, at a friend's mobile home, we got a sheet and anchored the sides and placed it over a floor vent from the air conditioner so it would blow up into a fort. It was cold as crap, harnessing the power of the air conditioner to inflate our cool balloon igloo, so we got a blanket to get under, and were boyishly giggling over our cleverness as we lounged in our new creation. Soon, his father started pulling at the corner and we laughed like we were being chased. We were having a great time, and it was no surprise that his father wanted into our cool-ass fort. We were wrong. He pulled the inflated igloo apart and virtually screamed at my fellow fort dweller, "What are you doing? Under the covers with another guy!" He then slapped my friend across the face hard. I'll never forget that looming monstrous man interrupting our innocent game with his adult-themed insecurities. I didn't understand that moment for years, and truthfully, I still don't understand that insane conclusion. I never went over to his house again. I hope his smile survived his childhood. Story 49. I was a very drawn kid. There was a lot of physical, mental abuse in my family. So anyway, I got invited by this girl to spend the night her. I was stunned but so happy. During the night, we were sleeping on the floor together. She started crying and I didn't know what to do and never let her know I was awake. My back was to her. Her daddy came in and was asking her what the matter was. She told him that she didn't want me there, but she wanted her best friend, whom I guess she had been mad at. He told her he'd take me home in the AM and they'd pick up her friend. I never let on that I was awake and right there hearing all of this. I don't think I ever stayed with anyone again. I was crushed and never told anyone this. Makes me sad now to even think of this. Well, I have my 2 kitties now and I feel blessed. Story 50. The morning after a sleepover, the girl's mom went inside this little shop to grab donuts, and we all waited in the car. While we waited, we started being snoopy and going through the glove box. We found many, many pictures of her mom eating cake off of her dad's pee. Those pictures were never spoken of again. Story 51. When I was younger, I was having a sleepover at my best friend's house. She had an older brother who was about 19 at the time, and he was going through a rough patch in his life where he was slowly getting into substances. We were sitting in her family room the day Pope John Paul II was dying. All of a sudden, her front door gets kicked in. There was so much screaming. 5 or 6 police officers burst through the door, guns drawn, looking for a fight to arrest her older brother, who had apparently just come back from selling substances to an undercover cop. He came downstairs completely out of it, and he was arrested. The police officer proclaimed that he was being arrested for trafficking of substances, possession of this, manufacturing that, and a few other things. It was so awkward afterwards. His parents were in complete shock, disappointment, and disbelief, and his mother was weeping uncontrollably, that I kindly excused myself and made the 2-hour walk home to avoid it. Story 52. I slept walk as a kid, and parents didn't really bother to tell me or inform me, really. They'd mention it, but I never remember doing any of the things they mentioned, so as a kid, I just shrugged it off. Slept over once and crashed on the couch. Apparently, I got up in the middle of the night, just kind of loudly asking for water. Repeatedly just yelling for some water because I was thirsty. The kitchen was like directly to my left. Someone woke up and appeased me with a glass of water. Woke up with no knowledge of this. Everyone acted oddly with me in the morning, while I still had no idea. It wasn't cleared up until like a week later. They must have thought I was crazy. Story 53. I was at a friend's house, and it was told that their grandparents would be coming over for dinner. I didn't mind that at all. We ate, and it was very nice. Everyone talked a lot. Then the parents and grandparents left the table, and my friend let out a small fart. I said, "Silence, please." Everybody freezes. And I let out the loudest, wettest, longest-ass ham-thundering, butthole-clenching fart you have ever heard, and I nearly shat myself. We both exploded with laughter, and it all stopped when we noticed the parents and grandparents in the doorway. The grandma started to cry, so I excused myself and hid in their bathtub till 10 p.m. Also, another time, I was sleeping over at a different friend's house. He invited 2 girls over. One I liked, and one he liked. I remember waking up at 2 a.m., and I had not pants or underpants. Story 54. Was sleeping on the floor. While there, I had a pretty good view under the bed, and I came face to face with some seriously skidded up underpants. I wasn't impressed. Story 55. I was at my girlfriend's house, and we were getting down and dirty. We thought we were home alone, but her dad was right downstairs the whole time. She was making noises that were definitely audible from downstairs. We finished up and went downstairs, and her dad was sitting right there on a sofa. "Hey, Chris, how are you?" he said. I had no idea what to say. I awkwardly said hi to him. He asked me to join them for dinner. The entire dinner, I was expecting him to leap across the table and kick my ass. He didn't. He seemed relatively jolly the entire time. For me and my girlfriend, it was the most awkward dinner we've ever had. Story 56. Being exposed to my best friend's abusive father. This guy was a piece of work. I remember cowering in misery at the dinner table and saying I wanted to go home. I also realized how awful it was that my friend was stuck in this environment 24/7, whereas I could escape fairly quickly. Story 57. When I was pretty young, say 6 or 7, I was staying over at one of my good friends' houses. I stayed there a lot, so her parents knew that I would sometimes sleepwalk. What they did not expect was for me to sleepwalk to their kitchen, put an apple in the toaster, pull down my pajamas, and pee on the kitchen floor, right in front of both of my friends' parents. Apparently, I thought I was in a bathroom. These same parents still bring this incident up at dinner parties. There's no living down the shame of the great sleep piss. Story 58. Mother and father got into a heated argument, which resulted in him slapping her and then throwing her over a fence. Worst thing, my friend just kept playing Super Nintendo with his eyes glazed. Story 59. I caused a hilariously awkward situation because I thought it was funny. I was visiting my, later I learned highly religious, new friend's house for the first time. His parents made steak for dinner, and as we sit down at the table, I grab the steak knife, hold it up, and with a 100-yard stare quietly say, "I haven't been allowed to hold knives since the incident." The room was silent, and I continued to stare at it for a good 20 seconds before I began laughing my ass off. Later, I was told I seriously freaked out his family, and my friend was mortified, but they were able to look back on it and laugh. I was probably like 12 at the time. Story 60. When I was like 13, my friend's little 9-year-old brother chased his handicapped 6-year-old brother around with their mom's douchebag, yelling, "Mom puts this in it." Just then, my friend's mom, who I had never met, happens to come home to catch them doing this, and the older one told her that I found the douchebag and told him to do it. I just left. Story 61. I got up to pee in the middle of the night. My friend's dog knocked me over, held me down, and started humping me. I was maybe 8. Very small and thin. I couldn't fight the dog off. Thank God I was wearing pants and not a gown. I basically had to lay there until he was done. I still don't like big dogs to this day. Story 62. 13-year-old me was at a friend's house for a sleepover. We were sleeping in the entertainment room, which was right next to his parents' bedroom. We then hear a rhythm of soft thuds. The pace begins to pick up. I wasn't too sure what it was at first, but then another kid leans over to my friend and asks, "Are your parents having sex?" My friend stayed quiet. I could tell that with every thud his childhood was being chiseled away. Story 63. I was at a friend's house and we went over to pet his dog, an old golden retriever. She did not move when he touched her, and we soon realized she was not moving or breathing at all. He got his father, who came over and confirmed that she had passed away in her sleep. The whole family was crying, and I was a little too young to really grasp how sad it was to lose the family dog, even in such a peaceful way. I suppose it was really sad, more than it was really awkward. My parents had to come pick me up so that they could grieve as a family. Story 64. I sneaked out with my friend so to scold about the neighborhood at night, came back and found his mom's boyfriend passed out drunk on the couch with his pants down and his hand in his pants. Story 65. Sleepover at my house. My best friend and I were in my room watching a movie, and I fell asleep around 10. I woke up to her nudging me violently because apparently my parents decided it was the night they were going to make their headboard slap the wall over and over and over. Our bedrooms shared a wall, and my folks were so obnoxious about it. My friend was mortified, so we went in the basement and waited until we felt it was safe. I didn't have friends over much. Story 66. Hope I'm not too late. In first grade, my best friend Will and I used to roll up in blankets and caterpillar around his house. We called this taco time. One day we tacoed right into his parents' room. His parents were doing it doggy on the bed, and we were all curled up in blankets watching. They noticed, screamed, and we tacoed out of there as fast as we could. Story 67. When I was around 10 years old, I peed my pants while spending the night at my friend's. I ran to her room to change my shorts, but when I went back out there, her sister was sniffing around with a grossed out look on her face. I played dumb about any stink. Then I did it again. The problem was, when I would laugh, it would open the gates. So I tried desperately not to laugh at jokes or anything funny, to avoid any embarrassment, but to no avail. I was too afraid to talk to my mom about it, so I went years with the problem. Story 68. I was at my childhood best friend's house after a sleepover. We were maybe 10. We went to play a game on the home desktop, but someone had left Playgirl up. It had to have been either her younger brother, who was always on the computer, or her mom. She jumped to the brother conclusion, relentlessly teasing him as soon as we saw it, and for weeks, if not years, after. I just sat there uncomfortably until my parents picked me up. Story 69. At my best friend's birthday party in 6th grade, we all shared a party pack and each got our own 12-pack of soda. Around 3 a.m., I had massive diarrhea. I bizarrely miscalculated my endpoint, and some came spurting out onto their white carpet. I tried to wipe it up and made it even worse. I went back to the party and watched softcore adult film with the homies. His mom got really pissed and yelled at him about it. I walked home alone at 7 a.m. They never came looking for me. That's kind of crafty. Anyways, we drifted apart after that. Story 70? I used to sleep under his bed, don't ask. One morning I woke up, but for whatever reason, I thought I was in the bathroom and I just peed right there. I blamed the dog and asked for a pair of his underwear because I spilled water on myself. He knew. Story 71. Went with my friend and his mom to her brother's house. Early 80s, and they sat the kids in the living room and they had an illegal copy of heavy metal playing for us. I was probably 10. Heard quiet then laughing from the adults' room. The talk about bullcrap and ounces. Then friend's mom came in and quickly said, "Let's go." Kind of figured years later they were doing powder and then started fighting about a deal gone bad. Story 72. It was the first time when I visited my friend's house. His mother left us home alone for a while and went to buy some food. I decided to explore their apartment, so I walked into his mom's bedroom and started opening some drawers. I found a sex toy here. so I didn't know what it is. She walked into the room just after I picked it up from the drawer. She seemed terrified and called my mother to pick me up. I realized the awkwardness of this situation a few years later. Story 73. I was sitting in the living room with my friend and her dad. The dad told my friend to call her mom and ask when she'll be home for dinner. My friend puts the phone on speaker, and when her mom answers, she mistakes my friend for her older sister. She then goes on a rant about how the father apparently cheated on her and they would be getting a divorce shortly. So I sat there while my best friend and her father all found out there would be a divorce. Story 74. Mine is also a friend at my house, awkward story. In college, my buddy and his GF at the time had slept in our pool house and having sex all night. The next morning, he comes upstairs and my dad is waiting in the kitchen for him. He tells my buddy that he will cut his damn nuts off if he ever uses our house for a sex hotel again. My friend just says, "Yes, sir," and heads upstairs to my room, and we quietly played video games for a while after that. Story 75. Sleeping at my best friend's place when we were 16. I'm a girl, he's a gay guy, and waking up in the morning with his leg covered in blood from my period that had started in the middle of the night. Same friend, another sleepover, got up in the middle of the night with the worst stomach pains. Did the most toxic crap and opened the bathroom window only to discover said windows were alarmed and the entire family came running, only to screech to a halt when the smell hit them. Story 76. One summer night about 12 years ago, I was at a friend's house playing video games. It was about 3 in the morning and we were tearing up some bots in perfect dark, N64, when suddenly his half-naked senile 80-year-old British diaper wearing granny strode into the room and yelled, "Where's my taco? I can't sleep without my taco!" I screamed, my friends screamed, Granny screamed. This commotion woke up the parents who revealed that Taco was a Chihuahua who had been dead for 10 years. Story 77. It was an embarrassingly awkward moment for them. His mother thought I was still asleep and she told my friend not to hang out with me at camp, citing as her reason that I get him into trouble. On the ride to drop us off, my 12-years-old self found the courage to interject, "And you don't have to worry, Mrs. Gray, I'll stick to myself. I wouldn't want to get anyone in trouble." We drove in silence for 5 miles. Story 78. I had just moved to a new area and was making new friends. The first time I get a kid to stay the night at my house, his cat dies while he is away. Very awkward pickup the next morning. Also, I was staying the night at a friend's house when the mom found out she was pregnant again. She didn't want another kid, and we could hear her sobbing all night. Story 79. When I was about 12, I slept over at my friend's house. I didn't really know them well, but we wound up sleeping in her living room. The girl was my friend's neighbor. When I woke up in the morning, her older brother was spooning me. He wasn't even in the room when we went to sleep, and I didn't even know the kid. I just woke up freaked out and left. Story 80. My friend's dad had a heart attack and died in the bedroom. This was when we were about 6 or 7. My friend's mom called my parents to come pick me up, but due to certain circumstances, neither of them arrived until several hours later. I kind of locked myself in the bathroom and pretended I couldn't hear anything while the mom explained everything to my friend and her siblings. Story 81. I used to sleepwalk when I was a kid. Never knew I did until my friend's parents told me that I repeatedly kept trying to crawl in their bed. Same friend. One night his dad came home pretty late from the bar. He walked into the bedroom, dropped his shorts, lifted the toy box lid, and began pissing. His wife followed him in to tell his drunk self that he was not in the bathroom. Story 82. I was at my friend's house for a sleepover, and she had an autistic brother. We went to the kitchen, and he was just standing there without any pants or underwear on and facing us. I ran out, and my friend and her mom were mortified, apologizing, even though it wasn't their fault. Kind of traumatizing for a 6-year-old. Story 83. Was at a friend's house when I was 10, and his dad casually and gently punched me in the stomach in a total joking manner. It hurt so bad I crumpled over and cried for hours. Turns out my appendix had burst and I had lymphoma. Story 84. There were 3 of us at a friend's house when we were around age 8 and we were hungry, so my friend asked if we could have something to eat, and her mom was like, "No, we can't afford to feed everyone." Then she gave us 1 taquito each. Story 85. I was on the top bunk and humping the bed because that's what little boys do. Friend's dad walks in the room and I panic, so I pause with my ass in the air. His dad talks to him a second and then asks me, "Do you normally sleep like that?" Yeah. Okay. Story 86. My best friend in elementary school apparently never learned to wipe his own ass. We were playing in his room when he left to go to the bathroom. A few minutes later, I hear him screaming at his mom to come wipe him. I had no idea how to act when he came back in the room. Story 87. In 6th grade, I had a friend, and the first time I went over his house, his brother got into an argument with his parents and threatened to take his life away. The brother climbed over the balcony and threatened to jump while we all stood outside trying to talk him out of it. Story 88. I was reminiscing with my oldest friend about how we met. He has always had a weird family, but he recently told me of a conspiracy between my mom and himself to always be at my house instead of me ever going there. Story 89. We were playing apples to apples with his family and a family friend. My friend happens to be black. His parents are white. Anyways, the adjective was earthy, and I thought I had the perfect card, the Williams sisters. Needless to say, it got pretty awkward after that. Story 90. I was sick and sneezed. The sneeze caused me to fart, which turned on me quickly as I proceeded to crap my pants. I pissed a bit, then I immediately threw up. Burped, then threw up again. It was awesome. Story 91. Was at my friend's house when she got into a fight with her parents. A massive fight involving lots of screaming and some hitting. I just stood there and watched until her dad shuffled me downstairs to watch TV. Story 92. I stayed at a friend's house. After her parents went to bed, she's starting saying awful things to me and clawing me, hitting me. Said I'd never get out of there alive. I cried so loud her parents woke up and she denied the whole thing. Awkward. Story 93. Waking up as her dad was playing the role of the tooth fairy. He froze, and we both stared at each other. I rolled over and went back to bed, and nothing was mentioned about it. Ever. Story 94. Once I got to my friend's house, and he was just there, naked, sitting in front of the computer desk. I played like it was nothing. He also did. He eventually got dressed by his mother.